Poor people will rub off on you so they don't even sanitize. Some carry antiseptic for gargling because it's the dry season.
It's unclear if Wendy, my mother-in-law, carries it for that reason or with another purpose, but it's obvious there's malice in her actions.
Mom, let's go home.
Okay, I understand. Let's go home. On the way home, Mary says something shocking.
Soon your company's going to go bankrupt.
The air felt like it froze, as if Mary's anger was burning through the cold. My name is Sasha James. I just turned 55 this year. I don't have a husband. My daughter Mary was born 25 years ago. The day she was born, I lost the love of my life. My husband ran a company and was always busy. Still, he loved me and proposed even though I was unsure about being a CEO's wife. I thought we could make it work, but fate was cruel. After hearing about Mary's birth, my husband rushed to the hospital, but he died on the way. He had just undergone heart bypass surgery weeks earlier. It seemed successful, but he never made it back. The delivery room, filled with joy, suddenly felt like a funeral, despite everything I had to go on. To raise my child alone, which was an exhausting journey. Mary was once reprimanded by her preschool teacher for being mean to a friend. I scolded her harshly, Mary tried to explain, but she ended up crying. Every day was tough, but slowly Mary started to communicate better. She matured. Being a single mother was hard. I faced prejudice. But Mary and I made many memories together. Mary graduated college safely. She recently turned 25. Happy birthday, Mary. I made you this cake.
Wow, Mom, you made this? It's amazing. Thank you.
This might be our last birthday celebration, just the two of us. Next year, we'll celebrate with everyone together. I glanced at the engagement ring on Mary's finger. Mary had returned home the other day, smiling as she showed off the silver ring. David had proposed. Seeing her smile reminded me of my own engagement day. Mary and David had been together since high school, almost 10 years. They faced some tough times, but they're now close to reaching their goal. As I stared at the candle on the cake, I muttered to myself, it'll be lonely when she leaves after 25 years. Tears unexpectedly rolled down my cheeks.
Mom, thank you for everything. Even after I get married, I'll always be your daughter.
I couldn't send my husband off with a smile, but I want to send Mary off with joy. After some time, David came to our house. He formally asked for Mary's hand in marriage.
Sasha, thank you for watching over us for 10 years. I promise to make Mary happy. Please let me marry her.
Oh, what should I do?
Mom, stop teasing us.
We all laughed. Despite earlier sadness about Mary leaving, seeing them together, I knew her happiness lay with David. David often visited us. We even went on trips together. His formal request felt almost unnecessary. I trust David with Mary. I'm sure my late husband would approve. Mary has always been bad at expressing her feelings. Please don't shut her down when she's wrong. Talk things through calmly first. But if it's something like cheating, bring her to me right away.
Mom!
Laughter echoed again. I realized then that Mary's happiness was with David, standing by his side. David, a responsible man, wanted to do things properly. Even though he's already close to her family, if Mary is with David, even my late husband wouldn't complain. Mary has always struggled with expressing her emotions. Please, be patient with her, David. I know things may be hard at times, but talk things through before deciding on anything big.
Oh, Mom!
Laughter echoed again. I realized how deeply David cared for Mary. Despite everything, Mary's future happiness with David was all that mattered. David's mother, Wendy, was running her own company, which kept postponing the family meeting.
Mom, it's just hard to find a time for her since she's the CEO.
Oh, I understand. After several cancellations, Wendy finally set a date for the family meeting.
Next month's last Saturday is open, so let's make sure it happens. Don't cancel on us again. It's a time we managed to open up.
Her tone was sharp. It left me uneasy. On the day of the meeting, I dressed up in formal clothes, thinking Wendy might make remarks about casual attire.
Mom, there's no need to dress so formally for this.
I just have a feeling Wendy would criticize me for anything less. We arrived at the restaurant early, waiting for David and Wendy. When they arrived, I was struck by Wendy's aura, polished and intimidating.
I'm Wendy, David's mother. Nice to meet you.
Wendy's demeanor was sharp, her movements graceful, but her gaze cut like a knife. She sighed slightly and led the way inside without another word.
Sorry about my mom. She's always been like that. Even I've always found her difficult.
It's okay, David. I always thought she seemed like someone from a different world, like nobility. David's face clouded for a moment when I mentioned nobility.
Mom's already inside. Let's go.
The air felt heavy. But I followed Mary into the private room. Wendy was already seated in the place of honor. Her posture, perfect. It felt like she was making a statement.
David, sit here. Mary, there. And you, sit by the door.
I felt like she was subtly telling me that I was of the lowest rank.
I've heard you have back problems. You'll need to be near the door in case you need the restroom. You might even need a wheelchair.
Thank you for the consideration. But wouldn't it be better for you to sit by the door too? You might need it more. Wendy's face hardened as I spoke. Clearly unused to being spoken to like that.
No need to worry about me. Thank you for your concern.
Wendy's smile didn't reach her eyes. The meal began in awkward silence.
Didn't your parents teach you the proper order to eat food? You start with a soup, then bread, then the main dish, and finally the side dishes. It's common sense and part of good manners.
Wendy smugly explained this strange etiquette.
The reason we start with soup is to stimulate digestion.
David smiled awkwardly. He was probably raised with this strict instruction, but that's not how I raised Mary. I didn't teach her such nitpicky rules. Just the basics. Don't walk around during meals. Don't chew loudly. Wendy's detailed etiquette was more suited for formal occasions, not everyday life. Mary had reached for the main dish first, which seemed to upset Wendy. What Wendy is saying is correct, but isn't the heart of manners about consideration for others? Shouldn't good manners be about respecting the other person? Criticizing others for lacking manners is, in itself, poor manners. Wendy's face flushed with anger, and she quietly fumed.
Talking to someone so uncultured is exhausting. David, you should reconsider this marriage. Mary's mother is too crude for our family. Or Mary, maybe you should cut ties with this woman and learn proper manners to be our daughter-in-law.
Wendy rambled, saying whatever she pleased, ignoring David's pleas for her to stop.
Please don't speak that way about my mom. You may be David's mother, but I can't allow you to insult her.
Suddenly, Wendy pulled something from her bag and dumped a liquid over my head.
Poor people rub off on you, so you need to be sanitized.
The smell of alcohol stung my nose. I couldn't tell if she always carried this for such moments, but it was filled with malice.
Mom, let's go.
Yes, let's go home. David stood frozen in shock at his mother's actions. Mary took my hand and glared at Wendy, but Wendy just smirked.
I'm sorry.
David, don't apologize. We are from a higher class than these two. Soon, your company will go bankrupt.
Wendy stared in disbelief as the coldness of Mary's words filled the room.
What are you talking about?
Mary didn't say anything more. She wiped the liquid from my clothes and walked out. We never returned to face Wendy again. Days later, David showed up at our house looking pale and exhausted.
I should have apologized sooner, but I've been trying to convince my mother. She refuses to admit she's wrong, so I came to apologize on my own.
His voice was thin and weak, showing how much stress he was under. Though David wasn't my son, he felt like family after 10 years. It hurt to see him struggling so much. Come inside, David. Let's have some tea. You've been through a lot. Are you okay? Though it wasn't my place to ask, I sensed he had a lot on his mind.
To be honest, I've always hated my mom. She's always demanded that I repay her for raising me and has pressured me with her expectations.
I could imagine the situation all too well.
I've always been told I was the heir, and I had to follow the family's expectations. I rebelled once, during high school, when she wanted me to attend a prestigious private school. Instead, I chose to attend a public school with a baseball team where I met Mary. Mary was the team manager and I fell in love with her. No matter what my mother says, I want to marry Mary. Please, let me marry her.
David trembled as he knelt on the floor. David, look up. It's not about me, it's about you and Mary. I've seen how much you care for her over these 10 years. I trust you with her happiness. David slowly lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. He must have been terrified that his mother's actions would ruin everything, but his tears showed how deeply he cared for Mary. David, if you truly want to make Mary happy, you need to break free from your past.
I understand. It's about my mother, right?
I nodded silently.
I'm tired of living in fear of her. My father, who's still in the hospital, was the only one who ever understood me. He said that as the heir, My mother could never understand what I was going through. For my father's sake, I've made up my mind.
I'll support you and Mary, but it's up to you to take the next step.
I understand. I'll do it.
The time finally came. Wendy arrived at the restaurant looking displeased.
What is this cheap place?
We were at a family restaurant, which Wendy had probably never been to. She looked confused as she scanned the restaurant. These are the papers for the adoption.
Adoption?
Yes, David is officially joining our family.
This is outrageous. He's my only son. How dare you try to take him from me?
Wendy stood up in anger, slamming the table.
This marriage is a joke. Mary isn't worthy of David. We are of a different class. We help people like you, not the other way around.
Wendy ranted on, but I remained calm. Why are you so obsessed with social status? I work with many wealthy clients, but those truly born into wealth don't act like you. Only those who recently gained wealth are as insecure as you. Wendy began to tremble.
Don't compare me to those people. I was born into wealth. Your actions say otherwise.
What are you so afraid of? Wendy froze at the word afraid. David told me you were always told you weren't good enough because you were a girl.
So what? I was born a girl in a family where only men mattered. I had to marry a man older than me just to maintain my family status.
The truth was finally coming out. Wendy's bitterness was on full display. That's why you're obsessed with David being the heir. But if David marries Mary, your family's perfect lineage will be mixed with a commoner.
Shut up! You don't know anything.
Enough!
Wendy turned pale as David's father, Brian, entered the room in a wheelchair.
This is what your father wanted, Wendy.
Wendy's face turned pale as she saw David pushing his father in a wheelchair. Though still recovering, he had received special permission to leave the hospital for a short while. He had been listening to everything Wendy said about him.
No, you misunderstood. I never thought marrying you was humiliating. I was just...
Wendy fumbled for words, unable to come up with an excuse. Brian sighed, shaking his head.
Dad says he's divorcing you, Mom.
Divorce? No, please say something.
But Brian remained silent, refusing to even look at her. Wendy was in a panic, realizing that this wasn't the end of her troubles.
Sorry to interrupt, but we finalized all the necessary paperwork.
Wendy jumped at Mary's voice, clearly nervous about what was coming next.
Oh, and by the way, I own a significant amount of stock in your company. What? That's impossible. Actually, it's true. I've held a substantial amount of shares in your company for quite some time.
Wendy's expression changed from confusion to realization as she connected the dots.
Wait, were you that anonymous investor? That's right. But how? How could a poor family like yours invest that much?
Wendy was clearly in disbelief, her mind struggling to process the truth. I've been running my late husband's company ever since he passed away, and Mary has helped manage it. We decided to sell all the shares we hold in your company. Wendy's face paled even further.
No! Please don't do that. If you sell now, the company will collapse under its debt.
And after you're out of the picture, I'll buy back the shares. You've been embezzling money from the company, haven't you, Mom?
No, that's not true. I was just borrowing a little. I plan to pay it back.
Even if the company belongs to you, you can't just use this money for personal reasons. You could face criminal charges for embezzlement, even if you're the sole owner. Wendy was at a loss for words, unable to defend herself.
I've looked into everything, Mom. You've been dealing with some shady loan sharks, haven't you?
I didn't have a choice. I'll pay them back. Just don't sell the shares.
It's too late for that.
Wendy was desperate, pleading for mercy, but David remained firm.
From now on, you're no longer the head of the company.
Please don't do this. I'll lose everything.
Wendy's world was crumbling, and she knew it. Without the company, she would have no status, no wealth, and no influence.
Please, David, don't abandon me.
It's too late, Mom. You've always seen me as a tool, not as your son.
No, that's not true. I love you, David.
If that's true, tell me what my favorite food is.
Wendy fell silent, unable to answer.
See? You don't even know. I'm just a tool to you. Now you'll have to fend for yourself.
After David cut ties with her, Wendy's life spiraled out of control. She was shunned by her parents and left to deal with the consequences of her actions. David took over the company and quickly removed Wendy from her position, appointing a new CEO. Wendy was sued for embezzlement and faced both criminal and civil charges. In the end, she fled town to escape her debts and legal troubles. Occasionally, David would receive desperate emails from her asking for help, but he never responded. Eventually, Wendy was arrested for theft. She was sent to prison, where she would serve her sentence. No one visited her in prison, not even her own family. Meanwhile, David and Mary quietly enjoyed their newlywed life. They held a small private wedding with just close family. One day, Mary invited me to a baseball game just like old times. On the way home, Mary handed me a black and white photo.
Mom, you're going to be a grandmother. I haven't told David yet. I wanted to tell you first.
Tears filled my eyes as I looked at the picture.
I'm so happy we could go to the game together. Just the two of us. Next time, let's go with the whole family.
I nodded, tears streaming down my face. From a distance, I watched my daughter, her husband, and my newborn grandchild. What seemed like an ordinary day was, for us, a moment filled with joy and meaning.